welcome to the Mariah Jean Fit YouTube channel. I'm Coach Mariah. Make sure you like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos as much as possible so we can reach a broader audience. We appreciate your support and enjoy the video. Hello and welcome to another vlog and podcast by Coach Mariah Jean Fit. Today we're going to dive into the age-old topic of cardio versus CardiNo. Now, before I start, I'm going to make special mention to the idea that this is going to be a combination of my professional and personal standpoint. However, I will mostly keep this professional and let you know when it is a personal opinion, because it really does come down to personal preference for specifically what goals that you're after. So first of all, I'm going to start off with the idea that I get asked all the time, should I add cardio into my training program? Should I add extra cardio? Should I do more than what I'm currently doing? And this usually comes from the same types of people that are not patient with specifically sticking to the plan, with adhering to their calories, and with understanding that the process requires time, consistency, and effort, doing exactly what you've been given. There is no extra cardio required if you already have a program that's set out and laid out for you, and cardio should not be used as a tool to undo, things like binge eating or things like falling off track with your macros or going away for the weekend and probably not eating on track, because I'm going to explain why it's a very inefficient way of trying to do that and you will get nowhere with it very quickly. So first of all, first point I'm going to touch on is that I don't do any additional cardio other than just walking around daily and moving my hands around and my weights training. There is no cardio I'm currently doing to keep this current physique, and I'm fairly happy with what I have at the moment. This is my off-season maintenance physique, and I keep an athletic build all year round, and I am not doing cardio. I don't go for runs. I don't go for interval sprints. I'm not doing crazy 10K runs on the weekend. I'm not running at all. The last time I ran was 6 months ago. So that's a personal standpoint. And I used to run when I was 21. Again, when I was anorexic and I was bulimic, I would run 10 kilometers a day. 10 kilometers a day! Because I thought that doing 10-kilometer runs a day was going to help me stay lean and skinny. And it did. It helped me stay skinny. But I had no shape. I had no bum. I had no legs. There was no and I'm saying this about myself. There was no definition there was definition, but there was no mass. I was just kind of like, I had these 2 twig legs and twig arms, and I was about 45 kilos. I'm now about 66, 67. I've dropped a little bit lately, but I don't really care about my weight anymore. And I've said this before, but the interesting thing was when I was running, I couldn't keep my muscle. And that's interesting, right? You probably listen to this podcast / vlog if you are currently a runner and you're really torn between keeping your running and taking a little bit of away so that you can see a bit more muscular development. As soon as I reduced my running and my extra cardio-based work, I saw an improvement in my physique, and I was able to increase my lifts, and I was able to increase my muscle mass, my strength, my shape changed. I was able to grow some glutes. I had some shape. I felt a lot better. I was sleeping a lot better. I didn't feel like I was burning the candle at both ends. So I had significant improvements in my mental and physical health when I stopped running. Now, this is a really big step for a lot of you out there who are runners currently. And if you love running, before you even listen to this full vlog and podcast, this is not me hating on running. This is not me hating on all forms of cardio, because I'm going to dive into the different types of cardio that there are, because it is a very big blanket statement. But this is me saying that if you find yourself conflicted at the moment because you are running and you don't enjoy running, then you can stop. You can stop running. You don't need to keep running. You don't need to keep doing that to yourself. And if you are running and you really enjoy running, I'm going to give you some tips and pointers on how you can continue to run, but you'll probably need to understand a few aesthetic and physique sacrifices that you may need to make. So first up, I am going to touch on the fact that whether you should do additional cardio on top of your current programming or even instead of weights training days entirely depends on your goals. If you have a specific goal to be ready for any of the following, a triathlon, a marathon, some sort of Ironman event, anything sort of requiring increased cardiovascular fitness such as group sports, team sports of any sort, things that are going to require you to have an increase in endurance-based fitness, right? Then yes, you should be doing endurance-based fitness training. You should be, if you are aiming for an event which requires you to run, then yes, you will need to run, right? So your goal to be able to run for a prolonged period of time needs to be aligned with your training. Your training needs to be aligned with your goals. So yes, you would incorporate cardio-based fitness, endurance-based fitness for your goal. If you're wanting to get into the police force, we know that you have to make a beep test with that. So yes, you would be doing beep test practice. It's not that hard to figure out that you should probably be doing the form of exercise that best conditions you for what you're wanting to achieve. The part where it gets lost in translation is that people somewhere along the lines, I don't know whether it was from watching those 80s exercise videos where people were doing like, I think it's when like things like body combat started and, you know, the Les Mills classes and things like that, aerobics, aerobics instructors, you know, you're getting that visual imagery. I'm going to pop it up here of like someone in this aerobics costume working out. Yes. Anyway, I can't do it. I'm not coordinated. People have correlated this idea that, I don't know why it's still here, like decades later, that this cardio-based fitness and this cardio-based training is best for fat loss. And I mean, if you look at the physiques that they used to produce, sure, they were quite slim, but there wasn't a lot of muscle, there wasn't a lot to them. And this came from this idea, and there's truth behind it, that there's no resistance, right? And resistance simply is loading the muscle groups with some sort of weight to pull against it, right? So that we can tear the muscle, we can create more muscle, we can grow muscle, and to maintain muscle as well. We actually require that process, right? So this cardio-based fitness, as much as, yes, it does get your heart rate high, whether it be running, whether it be skipping, and a lot of them, these cardio-based fitness types aren't resistance-based. So they're the types of cardio endurance-based kind of fitness where it really is just your body weight, you're kind of throwing it around. Even plyometrics, depending on whether or not you're, you know, we can get a little bit into a gray area there with calisthenics. If you're pulling yourself up, well, then there's your body weight is the resistance and the like. But mostly cardio is just, you know, literally things like running, jumping around, volleyball, sports, you know, that kind of thing. And these cardio-based exercises have been correlated to fat loss. People think that apparently it just equates to fat loss. I mean, sure, cardio will, yes, allow you to burn fat, but so does weights training, and so do many other forms of exercises. And the thing with cardio is that it can be quite complicated in that you actually need carbohydrates available for your body to access for it to burn fat efficiently and even more effectively. So if you have more carbs available, you know, you can't do keto and do cardio. It makes absolutely no sense, because your body actually loves to access carbohydrates in high heart training zones, and it will do better. It will perform better. It'll burn more fat in those high heart rate training zones with the presence of carbohydrates. But the problem is most people aren't eating enough carbs, they're doing cardio, and guess what happens when that happens? When we do just cardio-based training, endurance training, you know, running around like a mad chook, aerobics classes, and we're not eating enough carbohydrates, our body doesn't always access fat stores as a form of energy source. And it will often choose something that we don't want it to, which comes in the form of eating its own muscle. It's crazy stuff, but the concept of muscle wastage is that if there is not enough carbohydrates available, that the body will access proteins next. And if we don't have protein in our digestive system to access that we've consumed, what's the next best thing that's made of protein? It's our damn muscle. So that's when we actually literally start to eat our own body as a form of energy, and we get what's called muscle wastage. And you see it a lot. You see it in marathon runners. You see it in people with anorexia. Myself, I had really bad muscle wastage around the age of 20, 21 because I didn't have this knowledge. Back then, I wasn't eating enough food. I wasn't eating enough carbohydrates. I was doing 10-kilometer runs every single day when I was anorexic and bulimic. And as a result, I had some pretty bad muscle wastage, and I had no shape to me. I had a pancake bum. I had no shape. And because of the no shape, it looked like, you know, my weight, looked like I had a smaller waist because I didn't have any sort of like taper out from there. There was no shape, you know? So if I had no bum, then I couldn't look like I had a shape to me. So I was just straight up and down. And the muscle waste was very apparent in my legs, where basically you can see the muscle waste. I actually still have muscle scarring in my leg, and you can see it in some poses where that muscle wastage basically left a scar in my muscles from them eating themselves. So this is actually crazy. Muscle wastage can leave scarring, just like you can get scarring on the outside of your skin. So we know that muscle growth and muscle maintenance requires resistance-based and weights-based training, right? So we know that the best thing that you can do for your fat loss and your muscle growth or muscle tone, muscle definition, it's funny because muscle growth and muscle tone are exactly the same thing, but muscle tone is just marketed to women better because women don't like the idea of the words muscle growth, a little bit too masculine apparently. Anyway, muscle growth, muscle tone, and fat loss can all be achieved through resistance-based weights training. Literally weights training, which is what I prescribe, and a lot of coaches will prescribe who are sports nutritionists who are trying to give the client a body recomposition when they usually ask for, I want to tone up. God, cringe that term, but it's okay. A lot of people use it. I want to tone up. Basically, I want to grow some muscle and I want to lose some body fat. And that's when we give you resistance-based and weights training. We get a lot of clients as coaches come to us and say, but should I add more cardio in? Should I just add more cardio? The issue is right there that the client doesn't see that the plan to do weights training and to eat in a calorie deficit for fat loss is there for a specific reason. It's because it works. And we prescribe, and I specifically prescribe just normal daily steps to increase those, because sometimes it's the easiest thing you can do to increase extra calories burnt without going up into those high heart rate training zones or cardio-based activities. And I'll explain why in a second, why just normal walking is probably going to be a whole lot more beneficial for your goals. It might take a little bit longer than going for a run, but it's a lot safer for what you're trying to achieve, especially if you're in a calorie deficit. So obviously weights-based training gives us resistance against the muscle, so it's allowing us to tear the muscle and repair the muscle, and that's allowing us to then obviously grow muscle and maintain muscle mass. We need that to maintain the muscle mass. And guess what? Our heart rate goes high enough in our anaerobic training, in our weights training, where we're up in those 70, 80, sometimes 90% max heart rate zones, where we're burning body fat. How exciting! And because our heart rate is increased, we're getting a little bit of cardiovascular conditioning in there as well, probably not endurance based, but enough to actually give our heart a little bit of a kicker and have a little bit of that conditioning. So, you know, the idea of doing weights training for the rest of your life is actually quite sustainable. As long as you're doing all the injury prevention and the like, you don't need to be going for runs every day, especially if you don't like running, and you don't need to be going for runs to increase your calorie expenditure, because I'll explain exactly why. So running has minimal resistance involved unless you're running uphill or downhill. So really, when we look at running bang for your buck, if you slow down and start walking, you'll find that your heart rate will drop. And people get really worried about this and they think, well, hold on, because I'm not running, I'm not doing anything, I'm not burning anything. The wonderful thing about those lower heart rate zones, the 50 to 60% of your max heart rate, those low heart rate zones, is that the body can actually preference accessing fat stores even when you don't have enough carbohydrates available in the body. So when you're eating in a calorie deficit, if you're going for your daily walk, your body will actually like burning fat. It will actually choose to burn fat because it's not freaking out requiring carbohydrates for that really high, heart rate zone. And those low heart rate zones is where we actually see fat burning occur. Yes, it takes longer. Of course it takes longer to do a long, an hour walk. But most people are sitting all day. So if you can make one of the biggest changes in your life is to literally just start going for walks, and you will see that your fat burning capabilities will increase simply just from that, and obviously paying attention to putting yourself into a calorie deficit. That would be more beneficial than looking at doing runs and adding additional cardio in on top of your weights training. So that's why, as a coach, I literally prescribe weights training and steps. It's fairly common in the industry now because we now know more than ever that it's actually a lot simpler what type of protocol is required for these very general and very popular goals that most everyday people have, and even athletic level competition prep clients will have as well. So we know that walking is going to be a safer bet for preserving muscle because obviously the body is more likely to access body fat in those lower heart rate zones while walking then it is going to try and access its own muscle mass if we don't have enough carbohydrates available. So the body goes, not enough carbs, all good. I'm not going to access protein either. I'm not going to eat my muscle, but I might chip away at some of that body fat. That's literally how the low heart rate zone works with walking. That's why walking is so wonderful. And humans are literally meant to walk. We're meant to walk. That's what we do. And it releases serotonin. It's a great form of meditation as well. There are so many wonderful benefits to just walking. But people have romanticized the idea of running or high intensity training because they can feel their heart going a million miles an hour, and therefore it feels like they're doing something, which is a physiological response. It's kind of like, I see the flame burning really big, so something must be happening in there. But just because the flame is burning really big doesn't mean that there's a giant log underneath it being lit alight, you know? It could just be leaves. So the point is, that analogy is in reference to this idea that HIIT training and high intensity, cardio training, circuit training where you're sweating your balls off is not necessarily going to be the answer for your fat loss goals. It's not going to be the answer for your fat loss goals. And specifically if you're looking at growing some muscle and getting a little bit more shape to your body. That's why you'll see a lot of the time, and oh my God, I'm getting a lot of hate for this, people who do F45, they plateau with their results very quickly because they have nowhere where they can progressively overload. It's a lot of, maybe a small amount of anaerobic exercise, but mostly aerobic exercise. And so it's a lot of cardio. And so what will happen a lot of the time, if they're not eating enough food too, they may muscle waste. If they're not eating enough carbohydrates as well, they may muscle waste, and they may also see that their shape doesn't necessarily improve. They don't grow a lot of muscle. They might end up with less body fat than what they started with, but the same amount of muscle, and they might be not very happy with that because sometimes when we strip back and it reveals what's underneath, we go, oh shit, there's not a lot going on there, So that's why weights training is fantastic, because if we are going through that deficit and we're in a calorie deficit, and we are obviously expending enough energy daily from our weights training, and we're pushing enough in our training, that's another topic I'll cover, when we peel back the layers, we've got some definition, we've got some tone here, because we've been working on weights-based progressive overload, hypertrophy training. It's boring as shit. It is so boring, and I think that's probably why a lot of people think they have to add cardio in, because that high heart rate is often related to exciting, and people, how many times have you been excited and your heart rate's gone through the roof? So I think this is where this correlation is happening, is like, if I do cardio, if I do additional cardio, it's all of a sudden going to make this massive impact on my fat loss goals. Now I'm going to drop a huge bomb on you in a second about how inefficient adding extra cardio in is to your program, and why you're probably going to stop doing this or even stop asking to do this pretty soon. So we're going to talk about exercise, activity, thermogenesis, which we call EAT in the sports nutrition world, or in general in the fitness and exercise world. So exercise, activity, thermogenesis is the calories burnt, or the heat expended from your body in calories daily from your exercise. And the interesting thing is, from your total daily energy expenditure, so all of the energy that you expended for the day, right, that you let out and that you use, of all of the energy expended for the day, your exercise, activity, thermogenesis, this is for majority of the population, mind you, not for athletic level, is 5%. Oh God, that's an awful number. 5% really. My training is only 5%. Now, in the cases of athletic level training, it's probably going to be a little bit more than that. Not a lot more, but a little bit more. 5%, mate. 5%. Wow, wowee. Okay, your and that would even be inclusive of your cardiovascular exercise. So if you're going to swap out a weights training session for a run, 5%, mate. 5%. And if you're going for a massive run, maybe if you're lucky, 10%. So, crazy shit. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is not high heart rate. This is just, doing shit for the day, cleaning, walking around, doing what I'm doing, waving my hands around. It's probably how I burn a lot of calories. But walking as well. Walking is considered a non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's actually not considered cardio. Your walking is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so that's parking a little bit further away from where you work and literally walking to work and not, parking right outside your office. Contributes to 15%. 15% is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Now, I know you're probably thinking, hold on, Mariah, if I go for a run, I can run the same distance as what I can walk 3 times as fast, or I don't know, whatever math is. I mean, yes, sure, but it's still high heart rate training. It's still considered exercise activity thermogenesis. And here's the catch. When you put your heart rate into high heart rate training zones, 80, 90% max heart rate, even 70, 80, 90% max heart rate, it puts a stress on the body, okay? Exercise is a stressor on the body. It's good for the body. You get a release of endorphins after it, but it's a stressor on the body, okay? Because it's requiring significant effort to get that heart rate up there, to move everything. So it's a stressor on the body. And it's been proven that if you are training for longer than 2 hours daily, for most people, that this is going to be too much of a stress on the body, things like your joints, your heart, etc. This is why people who run marathons do lots of preparation beforehand, because it's a stress on the body. No one said that exercising for longer than 2 hours, if you're doing 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, is healthy. Okay, no one said that. No one said it was healthy. Okay, but people do that for specific sports reasons sometimes because they need to, because that's what they do. That's their passion, right? They like running marathons, they like running triathlons. But there's a point where the body starts to give way. The central nervous system doesn't like it. It's starting to shut down. We run out of fuel. We run out of energy. You know, there are so many aspects. And if we don't eat enough carbohydrates, if we're not going to fuel the body correctly for the day, eating a calorie surplus, specifically on things like sporting days where you're doing long endurance-based training events, etc., you're going to impact the body quite negatively. You're going to have spikes in cortisol and they're not going to come back down again. Right? Because we're not looking at that adequate recovery. We're not looking at adequately fueling the body either. It's like, really, the body is like a car. If you don't treat it well, it will bottom out on you. So if we're doing an hour and a half weights training session, then we decide to go for an hour and a half run, there is little to no benefit to that hour and a half run. You'd be much better off going for a walk, because when you go for that walk and your heart rate comes back down again, your body gets to chill the foot out and reduce that cortisol, let the endorphins rush in. And when you go for that walk in those low heart rate training zones, that's when you'll see that nice slow serotonin release. And we'll still be able to, it's almost like trick the body into burning more body fat, but without the added stress of the additional exercise activity thermogenesis, without putting that impact on your body, on your joints, right? Because we're not robots. We can't just keep going and going and going and going. You will see that probably you are doing far too much in the way of exercise and you're adding in cardio all over the place. If you are constantly tired, if your recovery is really shithouse and you're finding that you're not sleeping very well, you might be getting things like night sweats as well. There are so many signs of over-exercise, and a lot of the time you'll see over-exercise and people aren't taking rest days and they are adding additional cardio on top of their training. So the biggest impact on your total daily energy expenditure is actually your resting metabolic rate. Now that is what you burn because of your age, your sex, your height, your weight, some genetic reasons. Your mummy and your daddy had a metabolism and they passed it on to you, which, yes, we can kind of work with and change based on increasing muscle mass, blah, blah, blah. But there's actually factors in play here that influence your RMR, and your RMR has the biggest impact on your total daily energy expenditure. So the idea, and this is where I get really stuck with a lot of online coaches and trainers, because this ongoing war, is nutrition more important than exercise for fat burning? No, it's not more important. It does though, however, hold the key. And without nutrition, without putting yourself in a calorie deficit, and it's very easy to overeat your calories. It's so easy to overeat your calories. Without doing that, you can literally exercise till the cows come home. You can flog yourself silly. You can overtrain for 6 hours if you want to. You can go and binge eat 2,000 calories, 3,000 calories in one sitting, and you can convince yourself that you can go and exercise that off. But I tell you this, you won't. You cannot. Because there's a point where, and as I mentioned, that our nervous system dips out. Nope, no thanks, no thank you, too much for me. And it takes a shit ton of exercise to burn off 3,000 calories, right? It's a lot. So why are you making more work for yourself? Why are you doing this? Putting yourself in this position where you're focusing on all of these tangible things that you can do, like adding cardio in and doing more and doing more and doing more, when you could literally just do enough and follow the plan for long enough so that you can start to see and experience the results that you will get from doing exactly that. Don't get 1 to 2 to 3 weeks into your weights training program and your fat loss journey and go, what extra thing can I do? I think you can probably reflect and look at, okay, how can I better adhere to the plan? How can I better follow the plan? How can I better create structure for myself with my nutrition choices? How can I follow my macros a bit better? How can I reach out to my coach with a bit of assistance on doing this a little bit more efficiently? Where am I struggling? Start to reflect on what you already have and what you aren't doing currently instead of what you can do on top of what you've already got in front of you. So that leads me to my next point. Don't try and use additional cardio to cheat the system as like a shortcut. Cardio is not a shortcut to your fat loss goals. That is absolutely ridiculous. It is not like, trying to get, express shipping versus standard delivery. It's not how it works. Cardio has been overused for a very long time for things that's probably not necessarily required for. The times when I would prescribe cardio specifically would be if somebody has, honestly, endurance-based sports events testing criteria that they need to meet. And in any other case, if their doctor has said, hey, look, we need them to do cardio-based training because of X, Y, Z, and I can actually agree with that as a professional and as a practitioner, I can say, sure, I think so too. But honestly, there would be very rare cases where I would be going, yes, this person needs to be running 5 kilometers a day. It's just not necessary unless it aligns with their specific sports and performance-based goals, not necessarily fat loss goals. So your incidental steps are going to be far more beneficial, bang for your buck, and protecting and preserving muscle mass. And guess what? You're not a hero if you run a couple Ks a day. No one thinks you're awesome for running a couple Ks a day unless you enjoy it. That's what I'm going to eventually come around to is, I'm not there yet, but for the runners who are going, oh my God, Mariah, I hate you. For all you passionate runners out there, I used to be like you. I was a 10K a day girl for 2 years, all right? And I did a half marathon on a treadmill. Like, I've been there. For all you passionate runners, I will get there towards the end. I'll explain exactly how to manage your love of running and potentially why you may love running as well. And it's usually the similar reasons for most people. When I'm talking about nutrition and the impact with regards in reference to adding additional cardio, the biggest contributor towards making sure that you don't eat in excess and gain body fat, or exactly those two things go hand in hand, but overeat your calories, the biggest impact, bigger than adding in cardio, is going to be making sure that you understand how many calories you're eating daily and understanding your intake and not overeating your calories. And I'm going to use this analogy. Your total daily energy expenditure and your calorie intake, right? So your calorie intake is like a glass of water. If we imagine, put up a glass of water here. A glass of water, right? We have this glass of water, and you can imagine that when you're using energy, this is the food you've consumed for the day. And when you're using energy from this, if you were to engage in exercise activity thermogenesis, which is that 5%, 5% contribution towards your total energy expenditure for the day, it's like taking a tiny sip out of the glass, out the top, okay? And then your NEAT, that's another sip, okay? And then your RMR is the rest of it, and that can bring you down to bottom maintenance, right? But we want to get to a point where there's not only no water left in the glass, but you got to keep going past that point to start to, right, get to the bottom of the cup and then go underneath, and there's the fat, okay? Underneath the cup is the body fat. But if we're at the top of the cup, how easy is it to just pour that cup over? It's so easy. You can eat 300 calories in 10 seconds. It takes 30 minutes, if not more, to burn 300 calories in exercise. You can eat 300 calories in 10 seconds. If not, I could probably do it in 5 if you challenge me to it. And you will burn 300 calories. Sometimes it takes longer, in 30 minutes. It will obviously take longer for women than men, right? So now we understand the ratio. Now, it doesn't matter how freaking hard you run or sprint, that's how it works, okay? Yes, you could probably burn 300 in a little bit less than 30 minutes if you tried really hard. So that doesn't seem very reasonable or worth it, does it? Holy crap, right? If I could just be more mindful of my caloric intake, if I could just not eat like an asshole for too many days in a row, I might not think of constantly patching up these, hiccups with my caloric intake, specifically for fat loss with cardio, right? If I just followed the plan. And what's interesting if you don't engage in excess cardio, you won't be as hungry. That's awesome about this weights training thing, is that if you go and smash cardio on top of your weights training, your body is going to beg you for more food, and that's where you can start to see binge eating episodes coming into play, where basically you're over exercising and you're underfeeding, and that's when you can start that cycle. And that's where a lot of people go, now I have to exercise again, and now I have to train it all off again, and there you go, right? So it really is about balance. It's about balance, mindfulness, and being aware of your caloric intake, and it actually has, and it does have, no matter what anybody says, your caloric intake has the biggest impact on your fat loss goals. It always will, and your resting metabolic rate does as well. But guess what? Your resting metabolic rate, you don't have a lot of control over. So the one thing you do have control over is your damn food. Most people who think that they need to do additional cardio are blindsided to the idea that they need to pay more attention to their food and that they want to ignore it. They are trying to avoid the topic, and so they pick something else instead, like adding in additional cardio. So I want you to stop using cardio as a coping mechanism for every time you fall off track with your food, or you get frustrated with the idea that you simply have to be consistent. And if you get bored of being repetitive and turning up at the gym and doing what you need to do every day. But like anything else, you turn up to your job every day. You don't rock up to your job and go, mate, can I do something else today? Can I do someone else's job? Would that be all right? Can I just go, can I work in your office today? I don't really want to do my job today. Or can I do overtime? Will that mean that you'll pay me more? It doesn't make any sense. Just be consistent. Follow the plan. Be consistent. Follow the plan. Be consistent. Don't use cardio, adding in this crazy cardio as this idea that you're going to fast track everything and you're going to undo the food that you ate that you feel guilty for. It doesn't work like that. It's not like for like. That's not how energy intake and expenditure works. It is a daily balance, and you have to get the balance right. So if you're thinking to yourself, look, I still like running every now and then, I just want to see where my cardiovascular fitness is at. I think if you're in a calorie maintenance or a calorie surplus, why not? Every 6 months, I test my runs, see where they're at. They're perfectly fine. A lot of my weights training requires me to train quite intensively. And that's another point that I'll touch on. If you're asking for additional cardio because you don't think you're working hard enough in your training session, guess what? You're not working hard enough in your training session. That's not on your coach. That's on you, right? Oh, I didn't really feel like I did anything. Well, you're probably not working to max capacity or close to. And we use something called the RPE and the RIR scale in coaching. But basically, you can look it up if you really want to. Are you training hard enough? Are you rocking up and just going through the motions? Or are those last few reps really hard to push out? You don't want it to be near impossible where it's risky and you might, end up injuring yourself. But are you pushing hard enough? Your heart rate should be beating through your chest if you're doing a leg session, right? If it's not, you need to put more weight onto especially if it's something that's quite a safe exercise. Things like back supported exercises for legs are really good because they are quite safe in that they're not high risk exercises, especially if they're done correctly. But if you're not training hard enough, of course you're not going to feel like you did anything, and then you're going to feel like you have to add extra cardio in, and that is completely pointless. If you utilize your sessions wisely and efficiently and you actually push yourself in your weights training, you'd be surprised that you would actually burn enough calories in those sessions to achieve the goal that you're wanting to achieve anyway. Wouldn't you want to kill two birds with one stone? Yes, you would. So most of the case, and I see this specifically with women are not pushing hard enough with their weights training, and men are pushing too hard because it's an ego thing, right? So women are scared of pushing a little bit heavier because they're scared of getting too big or too strong, heaven forbid. It's not possible, honestly. This is as big as you get naturally. Like it's, I try really hard. But the point is that you might not be training hard enough. If you're asking for more cardio, you may not be training hard enough in your weights training. It's there for a reason. I will very rarely prescribe high intensity training or circuit training. I will only usually give it to my bikini competition prep girls once a week because it's a filler to try and, yes, burn some calories for a session where I don't want an extra upper body day because I don't want to overdevelop their upper body for bikini, okay? And so sometimes those all body circuit sessions is literally just a filler it just burns calories for a filler, and it's so that they don't end up too muscular for stage, which some of my bikini girls end up being anyway because everybody loves a bit of muscle, and I love programming, mostly split training anyway. So in the case, sometimes I will implement and put a circuit or a high intensity based session in for somebody who is a lifestyle client and they really love circuit sessions, and they, even sometimes they might have a specific injury in a particular area where they can't train a certain muscle group too much. And so sometimes I will put an all body circuit in there for that specific reason. But not often will I ever program predominantly aerobic based exercises unless it's for a specific reason. Police force testing is an example of one I will do, and fire brigade testing, and things like triathlon training and the like, and also even cardiovascular conditioning for team sports. So obviously excess high intensity cardio is not recommended in competition prep. I, for a while, played around with things like the Stairmaster with a lot of clients, and honestly, I realized that there wasn't a lot of bang for your buck. It didn't really make as much of an impact as I wanted it to, any more than it gave them more stress on the body. And even for myself, I competed. I prepped myself into 2 shows where one of them I became a double pro in 2 different divisions with NBA. And I actually was doing a trial and error. I actually only did 10,000 steps a day for my cardio the entire way through. I did do Stairmaster for a week in there, and I actually found that I got some pinch tests done. I ended up losing a little bit of muscle in that week, and a little bit of body fat, but actually muscle with it. And I decided it wasn't worth it to do the Stairmaster. I wasn't going to get any sort of benefit from that other than just doing steps. And so I went back to doing my steps. So I actually used, on myself, again, personal standpoint, I used myself as a bit of a test dummy for this idea that, okay, the resistance-based, and it wasn't even really resistance-based, so the Stairmaster is, yes, it's a bit of an incline, so yeah, a little bit of resistance, wasn't beneficial for my fat loss and muscle maintenance goals. The high-intensity cardiovascular training is not beneficial for muscle preservation, especially if you're not under any sort of form of resistance. And there's cardio that comes in all sorts of forms. It's not just running, but you've got bike riding, you've got rowing, you've got sprinting, which is different to running in a sense that it's short burst. But you've also got things like the ski erg and the like. You've got places like F45, you've got CrossFit. And as I mentioned with F45, a lot of the people who go to F45 don't see a lot of muscular development over time. They see that they might maintain what they had and just lose body fat. And sometimes they seem disappointed at the end because there's not much room for progression with things like progressive overload, because they've only got the weights that they've got to work with in that particular, session. And none of the sessions are, they're not structured where that you can have progressive overload over weeks and months. So you can't progress because it's random and they keep changing it all the time. So even in some cases with CrossFit too, I do find that CrossFit is kind of one of those hybrid sports in that, yes, there's a lot of aerobic exercise, but there's also a lot of anaerobic exercises. So I would only really suggest CrossFit for those who literally enjoy the group environment and don't care as much about the aesthetic goals, and they just like that sport and that they're prepared that there is a high injury rate. They may get injured. It's probably the highest injury rate sport that exists other than F45. And that they're going to be able to sacrifice the idea that their physique may not be their number one goal. It may just be just general health and exercise, a little bit of fat loss, sure, but you're not going to get a specific physique type with CrossFit because it's not specific physique based goal training. It's performance based, so it's all about increasing your lifts and increasing your time and everything like that. So looking at some other sports, things like team sports as well, obviously that's another cardiovascular based fitness. Again, if you want to improve your cardiovascular based fitness and you like team sports, you can't have your cake and eat it. If you want to improve your physique and have a specific type of body type, you could probably still engage in those team sports, sure, but maybe try and decrease the frequency of those, increase the frequency of your weights-based training sessions for your goals and the areas you'd like to work on and grow. And maybe you could keep the team sports maybe once or twice a week, but just understanding that crossover doesn't always mean that it will align with the goal, the aesthetic goal that you have. So performance goals and aesthetic goals don't always align, and that's really important to understand when it comes to thinking about programming extra cardio, is that there's really little to no benefit to doing this when you're looking at body recomposition specifically. In the case though, if somebody just wanted to lose body fat and they don't want to gain any muscle at all and they just don't want any shape, I mean, yes, maybe you could go and engage in just cardiovascular based fitness, which would be things like those group classes that you do at the gym, the Les Mills group classes. Again, with those, there's not much room for progression, where you see a lot of women very disappointed after, say, 6 months to a year of doing those classes. I think they're great to start off with for women to go into the gym specifically that are uncomfortable with those group environments. But I don't think it's anything that's sustainable, because obviously they get to a point where they're a bit hungry for more. They're thinking, oh, I'm not really getting the results that I wanted. Again, it's because it is just cardiovascular based training where there is no resistance or not much. You know, those little 10 kilo bars you're pumping around aren't doing shit. When we're not doing that, when we're not adding weights, we're not, you know, engaging in progressive overload, you're not going to see any sort of significant changes in definition in the body, because you're working with the muscle that you already had, and there's going to be very little muscle building occurring as you progress, because there is no progression with things like mostly cardiovascular based aerobic classes. It is just your heart rate going a million miles an hour. Yes, you'll access body fat stores, but if you don't have enough carbohydrates available, you may end up muscle wasting and end up with that pancake bum we're talking about. Okay, so I'm going to finish up with the final points, and I did say I would get back around to this for the runners, the avid runners. If you're a runner, if you're a person who does triathlons and you love running and it is your shit and you're just like, oh my God, I love running, stop it, don't take it away from me. No, don't stop running. If you love running, if your joints are okay, if you're doing all the right things, if you're taking care of yourself, if you're eating enough carbohydrates, that's a big one I see with runners. If you do struggle with not eating enough carbohydrates, you probably should have a chat to a coach, because you're probably not eating enough carbohydrates. Most runners aren't eating enough in general, enough food in general. You actually have to eat a lot of carbohydrates to fuel the energy systems required for running. And you know what? It will actually improve your performance. Eat more carbs and you'll run faster and more efficiently. And you will have a much better time of your running and improving your fitness. If you like running, continue running, but understand this. You must sacrifice your ideal physique for one that you end up with. Because you cannot have your cake and eat it. You cannot run and do marathons and then have an athletic body. And I'll use an example. If you've ever seen sprinters have these crazy muscly legs. Like, sprinters are they've got pretty good bodies, right? That's because they're actually only spending, 10 to 15 seconds, depending on how fast they are, 10 seconds in these very short, sharp bursts. And they're obviously having to catapult themselves off, so they're pushing off, and there's that resistance, and they're running at an angle. It's heavy duty shit, right? Because their heart doesn't end up being sustained in those high heart rates for long enough. It doesn't happen for long enough to incur muscle wastage. But marathon runners, on the other hand, are usually quite thin. You will see muscle wastage occurring, and they don't have a lot of shape. So if you want to continue running, understand you're probably never going to have a big old booty. You're probably never going to have that shape if you're running marathons consistently and running 10Ks consistently a day. I was there. No one is an exception to this, okay? And be okay with that. You're going to have to be okay with that. Otherwise, change your type of training and shift away from running, endurance-based running, and shift into weights-based training if you're wanting to change your physique from where it is currently. So that's about it from me. I was going to do a really short video on cardio versus CardiNo. My personal preference is CardiNo. I do like an occasional skip. The only reason why I like to skip once a week is just literally because it's fun, and I don't do it for any longer than 5 minutes, maybe sometimes 10 minutes, but I stop and I start and I stop and I start. It's just because it's a fun little thing that I actually love doing, and I don't do it for fat loss purposes, and I don't do it for adding extra, calories burnt onto my workout. I'll usually do it after maybe a shoulder session and when I know I've got a bit more energy in the tank. But I don't do it for prolonged periods of time, and I do it because I enjoy it. Roller skating is another one I really like doing, a cardio-based activity that I just enjoy doing because it's fun, and I do that on my rest days if I'm feeling a little bit sedentary, not because I feel like I have to exercise. And my final point is that a lot of the time when you come across people who like long distance running and they say, I have to run because I can't keep still, sometimes that has a lot to go with stuff that's going on up here, and it might be worth getting that addressed and seeking help and seeking professional assistance because with a psychologist, because I did that years ago. I had issues with sitting still, and I found running as a way to cope, and it was definitely a way to cope with stress and anxiety. And I found a way to be able to find stillness and to actually be able to sit comfortably and happily and not feel guilty for not moving and not have that addiction to exercise and over exercising and doing too much cardio. So a lot of people are stuck in that cycle because they feel guilty if they don't exercise. And if you do seek out professional help, if you know, honestly, I can't recommend getting a psychologist enough that is right for you, because you might find that your obsession and your desire and your need, you know, that you think that you have to do these runs and to go crazy with cardio may be related to something that's happening on the inside. Okay, so that's it for today's vlog, and I got a bit passionate today, so I do apologize, but this is definitely a topic that needed addressing, and it's nice and long one. If you want to have a look at the rest of our social media channels, make sure you check out our Instagram. You're obviously listening on YouTube or Spotify, so make sure you rate the podcast because it does help out with our exposure. Make sure you like our videos as well and share them. Share them with as many people as you think that this topic will apply to, because I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with this topic in some way or another. And our Facebook as well. We've got Facebook. Check out our website, mariahjeanfit.com, if you want to have a look at what we do and our client results. And that's it from me. Looking forward to doing another vlog for you soon. Okay, bye.